Well, I'm neither really a historian or from an incredibly spiritual background. I grew up pretty much as an agnostic, believing that everything maybe to do with the spiritual realm was just superstition. And perhaps somebody who I could thank for this view was this man, Richard Dawkins. If you've been watching the television, you'll have seen his latest series on the genius of Darwin. And it was as a child watching his Christmas lectures on the BBC, hearing him explaining about evolution, it really gave me this view that there was nothing more out there than the material world. And this is the opening statement from Dawkins' latest series. This series is about perhaps the most powerful idea ever to occur to a human mind. The idea is evolution by natural selection, and the genius who thought of it was Charles Darwin. It changed forever our view of the world and our place in it. What Darwin achieved was nothing less than a complete explanation of the complexity and diversity of all life. Now, that's a view I'd no longer agree with, and it was only when I went to university and I argued with some of the Christians who were there, who were scientists. I said, science has disproved the Bible. Why believe in the end of the Bible when you know that the beginning isn't true? And they were able to challenge me from the areas of science, and I, in the end, admitted that I was wrong, and I became a Christian. I didn't admit it to them because I was embarrassed about having argued against them and them being wrong. And now, one of the things I want to do is challenge some of the ideas which I learned at this time. Mark, who introduced me, he gave a talk on the God delusion on Monday, and he was challenging that last part of the statement that Darwinism is a complete explanation of all of the complexity and diversity of life. And if you've got some questions about that, then we've got a book here which you can take away at the end. It's free. It's the story of 5 atheist scientists who became Christians, and they did this actually by looking at the evidence for themselves. What I'm going to be looking at in this talk is the phrase highlighted in red on here, and the genius that thought of this theory of evolution was Charles Darwin. You're going to see how that connects into the whole theme of paganism. And so that's the Evolution Crisis book, and also if you're watching this on video, you can see the book online at the web address written there, theevolutioncrisis.org. Okay, so we're going to look at 3 basic worldviews. One is monotheism, and that's what I'd be now. I'd believe that there's one God, and he is separate from the creation. He's not a part of the creation, and he made it, and he's a divine ruler, and because he's all-knowing, he can make rules that work, and he set everything up so that everything works together, and everything has its place because he made them to be in the places where they are. And then perhaps the opposite view to this would be philosophical naturalism, and though I wouldn't have put it in those terms, that was what I believed before, and that was that nature is all there is, and that everything that there is has only been formed by natural processes. That's the idea that basically the rules of physics just happen to be what they are, and by sheer luck they happen to work, and they produce from molecules, they produce men over billions of years, and there's nothing else really guiding that process. Then there's another view, and this is what I'm going to call paganism, and I'm using quite a broad term there, and I'm including within that a few ideas. One would be the belief that nature itself is God, and that nature can be worshipped, that there's a kind of a consciousness running throughout nature. Also pantheism, the belief that everything is God, and polytheism, the belief that there are many gods, that may be nature spirits behind trees, spirits of war and love and peace and all these different kind of things. And also within that there's the belief that because God is in everything, and therefore everything is also God, and because we're part of everything that there is, and God is in everything, then we ourselves are somehow and in some way gods. And that's a process called enlightenment in kind of Hindu philosophy and in lots of thinking. The process of enlightenment would be somebody realizing that they themselves are divine. And we're going to look at that a bit later as the talk goes on. And so here's Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin would, to Dawkins, he would be the hero of rationalism, kind of a rejection of spiritual beliefs, the idea that there's a supernatural world, and the person who really put in that last piece of the jigsaw puzzle which would allow us to understand the world in a way which there was no requirement for God. And so after Darwin, people could very much decide if they wanted to believe that there was a God or not. There was no longer a necessity for him. Now, Charles Darwin wouldn't maybe agree with Richard Dawkins' statement that he was the genius that came up with evolution, because Charles Darwin looked back to the Greek philosophers, and he says in the 6th edition, in the preface to his Origin of Species, speaking of Aristotle, that we see here the principle of natural selection shadowed forth. So he knew that he was building on the work of others. And we're going to trace this back through history. And one of the first places we're going to look is to the Hindus. Now, in Hinduism, you start to see the theory of evolution a long time before it was ever written about by Darwin. We've got a quote here from Sir M. Moyner Williams, professor of Sanskrit at the University of Oxford in 1894. So this isn't just something that I'm coming up with. This is what he said. Indeed, the Hindus were Spinozists 2,000 years before the birth of Spinoza, Darwinists centuries before the birth of Darwin, and evolutionists many centuries before the doctrine of evolution had ever been accepted by the Huxleys of our time, and before any word like evolution existed in any language of the world. And within Hindu thinking, you have many of the ideas which we today would associate with science. You've got the idea of kind of something like the Big Bang, that once upon a time the universe was just the size of a single particle. And here this is in the Hindu scriptures. He, i.e. Brahman, that's the Hindu universal God who's everything, becomes the size of an atomic particle and brings to life this whole universe. And you also have the concept of millions or billions or hundreds of millions of years. And so after hundreds of millions of years, Brahman, the universal spirit, split an egg into parts, making heaven out of one and earth out of the other. And that's in the Vedas in 1400 BC. And you also have something similar to the biological principle of evolution, but from a spiritual sense in reincarnation. And if you look at this picture here, you'll see that life is coming out of the sea. It starts as kind of simpler forms, and as it comes out, gradually through death and rebirth, you come to man. And then there's something which would not appear in our biology textbooks, and that's that you go by death and rebirth through the caste system until eventually you come from man and into a god, which is kind of this Aryan man here. And that would be the process of enlightenment. When a person reaches enlightenment, that's the time when they really realize that they are a god. Then Hindu biological evolution, whatever creation is born is resolved once more and is moved again by the merits and demerits acquired in that life and enters into another body resulting from its deeds. That's the idea that new functionality and things can be acquired from one life and passed in to another. Cosmic evolution, and this is evolution in the grand scale from atoms right the way up to human beings. The idea that new functionality again can be acquired. These, i.e. creative processes in succession, acquire the attributes of the immediately predecessing ones from which they have originated. Each one not only has its own special attribute, but each succeeding one has the attributes of all the previous ones. So in there you've got the idea of kind of common descent and types of behavior and organs and things being passed on and things like that, and everything being built up from the simple to the very complex. Then we're moving on to the Greeks. Now, the Greeks were famous for their philosophies, and there's the guy Pythagoras that you've probably read about in maths, and you're familiar with his triangles and Pythagoras' theorem, but also he was very interested in the spiritual realm, and there's much kind of occultic stuff which comes out from things which he's taught, as well as the mathematical things. And where he got his knowledge from was actually traveling a great deal and finding out what other people were saying in different parts of the world. And here are some quotes. Pythagoras was the hero of Galati and the Brahmins. So the Brahmins are the Hindus, and this quote is saying that this is where Pythagoras got some of his ideas, is from Hinduism. Again, Pythagoras travelled widely, studying the esoteric teachings of the Egyptians, Assyrians, and the Brahmins. So these are all people who believed in a kind of a pantheon of gods. Again, some more quotes. The analogies between Greek Pythagorean philosophy and the Sankhya school are very obvious. Sir William Jones, pioneer of the Western study of Sanskrit. Also, it's more likely that Pythagoras was influenced by India, that's Hinduism, than by Egypt. Almost all the theories, religious, philosophical, and mathematical, taught by the Pythagoreans were known in India in the 6th century BC. So you can see there that the Greek thinking very much has its origins in some of the Hindu thinking coming out of India. And there you've got Plato, who built on the work of Pythagoras, and again there's the evolutionary thinking that you can see in his writing. These are the principles on which living creatures change and have changed into one another. The transformation depending on the loss or gain of understanding and folly. So not quite like our understanding of evolution today, but this idea that there is common descent, that the simpler forms of life have turned into the more complicated ones. And then here's what one scholar said. He said, "I very confidently affirm, if anyone will make himself familiar with the old Indian wisdom, religion of the Vedas and the Upanishads, he will shake himself free from the academic attitude and limiting Western concept of philosophy, and will then read Plato's dialogues. He will hardly fail to realize that both are occupied with the self-same search, inspired by the same faith, drawn upwards by the same vision." And then we had Aristotle, and if you remember when I looked at Darwin, he was able to say that it was Aristotle that he saw the first signs of evolution in his writings. He said he saw evolution foreshadowed in Aristotle's writings. You have Anaximander, and he said humans originally resembled another type of animal, namely fish. Empedocles says the greater part of the members of animals were generated by chance. Now that's somewhat like evolution as well, that says that new functionality comes about by random mutation, and it's then passed on, and only the fittest survive. And in Mark's talk, if you missed it on Monday, he was saying that natural selection describes very well the survival of the fittest, and that's a true principle, that those things which are fittest survive. What he said he doubted that could be explained by Darwin and evolution was the arrival of the fittest, and that's that random mutation can cause the great variety that we see here today. Again, you'll see natural selection in this next quote, that many races must have been able to beget and continue their kind, for in the case of every species that exists, either craft or courage or speed, has from the beginning of its existence preserved it. And that's Empedocles again. He said that all souls change into every sort of animal. Again, common descent. Okay, and here's a quote from the Bible, and this is talking about Athens, the city where these Greek guys were bringing out their philosophies. And this quote sometimes amuses me. It says, "All the Athenians and foreigners who lived there spent all their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas." Can you imagine that, having a society where you could do nothing but just talk about ideas, and somehow you'd make a living out of doing that? Well, that's apparently what they did. But today Edinburgh is called the Athens of the North, because Edinburgh has been deeply influenced by these philosophies in a time called the Enlightenment. And we touched on that word enlightenment in the beginning of this talk, talking about it being the process by which a person realizes that they are in fact God. And that's something which was there in Hinduism, but it's also there in another more esoteric kind of faith, and that's in Freemasonry. In Freemasonry, there's again a kind of an evolutionary thing where you progress towards the top by working your way through various degrees. And the way that you pass through from one degree to another is often that somebody is shut outside of a room, and they knock on the door, and a question comes from behind the door, and this person says, "What do you seek?" And the initiate will say, "I seek more light." And they're looking for a spiritual enlightenment in doing that. Now, in the time of the Enlightenment, it was the Freemason lodges that were actually the centre point of all the discussions that were going on between the great thinkers in Edinburgh. And here's a quote about Freemasonry. "In the Scottish Rite, you will be taught that our ancient ancestors who knew all the mysteries left enough traces so that we today, with diligent labour and teaching, may renew and bring them to light for your enlightenment. We now come to the great symbols of Pythagoras. Our symbols have descended to us from the Aryans, and many were invented by Pythagoras, who studied in Egypt and Babylon." Again, Egypt, Babylon, India, great centres of polytheism and pantheism, and what I'm broadly describing as a paganistic kind of philosophy or view of the world. Now, in the Bible, it talks about this kind of enlightenment process, and if you're in any doubt of what's behind Freemasonry, you could read a book called Morals and Dogma, written by Albert Pike, who was one of the Grand Pontiffs of Freemasonry in the Scottish Rite. And this book, you can buy it on eBay fairly easily, and it just goes through some of what's in the higher degrees of Freemasonry. And one of the rules in Freemasonry is that there's two main rules when you join into a lodge, and one is that you must believe that there's a supreme being. You must believe that there's some kind of a force or a creator out there. So you couldn't really be a Freemason and be an atheist. And the other is that once you have that belief, you must not talk about it. So you must believe it, but you must not talk about what you believe in that subject. It's off limits. And the reason for that is that when you get higher up in Freemasonry, they tell you who this being is. And this is what Albert Pike said: "Lucifer, the light bearer, strange and mysterious name to give to the spirit of darkness. Lucifer, son of the morning, is he who bears the light, and with its splendour intolerable blinds feeble sensual or selfish souls. Doubt it not, for traditions are full of divine revelations and inspirations, and inspiration is not of one age nor of one creed. Plato and Philo also were inspired." And so there's Albert Pike, who, a leading Freemason, saying that really where the wisdom of Freemasonry comes from is this fallen angel called Lucifer, though he wouldn't see him necessarily as a fallen angel. What the Bible says about Lucifer is, "How you've fallen from heaven, O morning star, son of the dawn. You've been cast down to the earth. You who once laid low the nations, you said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the Mount of Assembly, on the utmost heights of the sacred mountain. So what Lucifer was really saying there was that he desired to become like God and to sit, as it were, in his seat. And that's the promise, according to the Bible, that he's been making to humanity since the dawn of time. When he first tempted Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, he said, when you eat of this fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you will become like gods yourself. It was the promise that we ourselves could somehow become divine, which was his aspiration. The Scottish Enlightenment really was something transplanted from France and the things which were happening over there. And in France, you had the first encyclopedia produced over there, and most of the people involved in writing this were themselves Freemasons. And I think when you look at some of these writings, you'll find that they're not very anti-God in what they say, but they just never refer to him. And then you get to the end of maybe having read a whole encyclopedia, and you look at it and you say, well, I've read all that there is to know about human knowledge, and I see no God in there. Perhaps that's because there is no God. Voltaire, again in the writing at this time, he said, when I first read Plato and came upon the gradation of beings which rise from the lightest atom to the supreme being, I was struck with admiration. So again, you've got this kind of process of evolution from molecules right the way up to the most complex thing, but actually ending in God. So Darwinian evolution starts with the first life form and goes up to human beings. But actually, when you look at the background of this philosophy, it stretches from atomic particles into godhood. Then you have the modern Freemasonry and Sir Francis Bacon. Now, he was a leading Freemason, but he was also the founder of the Royal Society, which even today is probably the UK's leading scientific institution. And so these Freemasonry kind of ideas were very much around in these circles. Now, this is a bit of a side. You've got Adam Smith, again a leading Freemason, and he was the father of capitalism. And in the Bible it says that the prime rule is that we should love God with all our hearts, all our souls, all our minds, and all our strength, and to love our neighbour as ourselves, that we're to be kind and generous to other people. Now, Adam Smith turned this on his head, and he said, actually, the world will work best with enlightened self-interest, a kind of a survival of the fittest, but when applied to money and economics. And he said, if we look out for our own needs first, then we'll have much more to give to other people, and in the end, everything will work out better. And then, if you look at the bottom, you can see in Edinburgh, that was the G8 summit. When that happened, thousands and thousands of people gathered in Edinburgh to ask for the debt to be dropped to the third world. This is one of the results that the global capitalism has brought. And many of these philosophies which are championed in the Enlightenment, we see them starting to come apart in our time and not really working as they were meant to. Another guy from the Enlightenment period, James Burnet, Lord Monboddo. Now, a High Court judge called Lord Neves knew that this guy, Monboddo, had evolution a long time before Darwin, and he wrote this poem about him. He said, though Darwin now proclaims the law and spreads it far abroader, the man who first the secret saw was honest old Monboddo, the architect that president takes of him who bears the hoddo. So up and at 'em, lands of cakes, will vindicate Monboddo. So he was saying that this guy Monboddo had the theory of evolution a long time before Darwin ever did. And if you look there, there's the Canongate Freemason Lodge, one of the oldest Freemason lodges, and there's Monboddo in the corner, and There's Robbie Burns being made the poet laureate at that time. Now here are some of Mombodo's writings and thinkings. Those whom I call truly philosophers, such as Pythagoreans, Plato and Aristotle. And then another quote, now I think it is not at all probable that the Indians invented so great a science. It came from Egypt. So he's looking at scientific thought and thinking, it must have come from Egypt because it's pretty complicated. I don't believe it could have come from India because it would be more simple. But then he was rebuked by Sir William Jones, who disagreed in a letter to Mombodo and said the Brahmins were the originator of this philosophy, again saying it was the Hindus that it came from. Now, Mombodo believed that humans had come from orangutans. He said the orangutan is the animal between the monkey and man. There are, I know, many who will think this progress of man from a quadruped and an orangutan to men, such as we see them nowadays, very disgraceful to the species. But they should consider their own progress as an individual in the womb. This is no better than that man is no better than a vegetable. If therefore there be such progress in the individual, is it not to be that there should be progress also in the species, from the mere animal up to the intellectual creature? Now, Mombodo was a contemporary of Erasmus Darwin, who was Charles Darwin's grandfather. Now, Charles Darwin was not alive at the same time as Erasmus Darwin. Their lives, I don't think, coincided at all. But you can see in Erasmus Darwin's writings pretty much the full theory of evolution, but not as a completely biological process, also as a spiritual one. And this is in his book Zoonomia. Complex life, might have been gradually produced from very small beginnings, increasing by the activity of its inherent principles, rather than by sudden evolution of the whole by almighty fiat. What a magnificent idea of infinite power, the great architect, of the infinite power, the great architect. And this is a poem that Erasmus Darwin wrote. And you'll see in here ideas similar to the Big Bang and evolution. And again, finally ending up with godhood. Hail to the bard who sung from chaos hold, how suns and planets formed the whirling world, how sphere on sphere earth's hidden strata bend, and caves of rock her central fires defend, how the first embryon's fibre, sphere or cube, something like a cell, lives in new forms, a line, a ring, a tube, closed in the womb with limbs, unfinished laves, sips with rude mouth the sultry waves, seeks round its cell the sanguine streams that pass and drink with crimson gills the vital gas, weaves with soft threads the blue meandering vein, the heart's red concave and silvery brain. So you have something there which is kind of fish-like, and then leads the long nerve, expands the impatient sense, and clothes its silken skin the nascent ends. Earth, erewhile emerging from its liquid bed, it lifts in gild ere its nodding head. The light's first dawn with trembling eyelid hails, with lungs untaught arrests the balmy gales, tries its new tongue in tones unknown, and hears the strange vibrations with unpracticed ears, seeks with spread hand the bosom's velvet orbs, with closing lips the milky fount absorbs. And so there you've got a mammal, and compresses the dulcet, and compressed the dulcet streams, drinks warmth and fragrance the living rill, till step by step, aspiring trod, you climb from nature to the throne of God. And here we've got a photo of David Hume, one of the philosophers in the Enlightenment, and you can see him there sitting on a throne, almost as a god, outside Edinburgh's Law Court. If you've been on the Royal Mile, you've probably walked past that. Here's some more writing from Erasmus Darwin. From thus meditating on the great similarity of the structures of the warm-blooded animals, and at the same time the great changes they undergo both before and after their nativity, and by considering in how minute a portion of time, many of the changes of animals above described have been produced, would it be too bold that in the great length of time since the Earth began to exist, perhaps millions or millions of ages before the commencement of the history of mankind, would it be so bold to imagine that all warm-blooded animals have arisen from one living filament, a cell, which the great first course endued with animality, with the power of acquiring new parts, attended with new propensities, directed by irritations, sensations, volitions, and associations, and thus possessing the faculty of continuing to improve by its own inherent activity of delivering down those improvements by generation of its prosperity, world without end. And so there, for me, that seems to be a pretty complete theory of evolution. It's talking about handing down new parts, developing new functionalities, and common descent. It's surprising to me that Dawkins could say that it was really Childs who came up with this full theory from beginning to end, when so much of it is in his grandfather's writings. Now, I presented a talk like this on the web, and I had some criticisms coming in from atheists, and they said, well, what you're writing is nonsense here, because though Charles Darwin came up with the theory of evolution independently, another guy called Alfred Russel Wallace came up with the same theory. And so even if you prove all the way down that there's this spiritual link between evolution and paganism, your argument falls down because this guy, Alfred Russel Wallace, came up with it on his own. But doing a bit of research, found out that Russel Wallace was himself a spiritualist medium. And when you look on the Natural History website, it's got a certificate saying that. It says, Central Association of Spiritualists. This is to certify that Alfred Russel Wallace has been elected an honorary member of the association. So he was clearly involved in kind of occultic spiritual practices. Now, we're going to look at today, and I'm making the case that where you find evolution, you also tend to find paganism, that these two ideas go together. And so this is Edinburgh, you can see the crags there, and this exhibition is called the Our Dynamic Earth exhibition. It's an exhibition built with Millennium Project money to really show kids the beauty of evolution and the Big Bang. But when we look at this building, we see kind of a stone circle around the outside of it, female fertility symbol built as a sculpture there, the Mother Earth written on the outside of the building, the Mother Earth being the pagan goddess Gaia, who gave birth to the pantheon of pagan gods. When you go into the bookshop in this scientific exhibition, you find alongside books on evolution, books on ghost stories and feng shui, meditation, reflexology, tarot, yoga, and Chinese astrology. In the music section, you'll find CDs on Celtic spirituality, Native American ancestor kind of worship, Tibetan Buddhism, Reiki, again meditation, yoga, Tai Chi, and angels. Again, really delving in to the spiritual realm, and yet this is put forward as a scientific exhibition. Walking up and down the Royal Mile, you'll probably find often we have these New Age events on, and here, rather than Edinburgh becoming a centre of what you'd expect it to be, a rational centre after the evolution, but there's, I would say it's probably a centre for superstition at the moment. So here you've got past life readings, tea leaf readings, crystal ball, angel and fairy card readings. This is again taking place in the Freemason lodges where the Enlightenment kind of broke out. There's a medium in the meeting, and again this is all the different kind of Eastern spiritual practices. And I'm sure if you walk down probably any street in any city or town now, you'll find that there are many of these practices which really find their way back into Indian and Eastern kind of philosophy and spiritual practice, and you'll find that they're incredibly popular in our society today. And I'd make the case that it's because we've embraced evolution that we've also embraced these other things. Then we've got the rise of witchcraft, and you probably find many witchcraft shops as you go up and down the Royal Mile and walk throughout Edinburgh. Another occult supplier kind of sell lots of interesting things. I saw their website, and I think I saw some flying potion on there. I don't know what it does, but it seems to sell it. And tours going underground, 6, 7 or 8 ghost tours going into the underground city, and also active witchcraft temples in these places. I'm a Christian, and I've been in meetings where people have experienced physical healing, and one of the things they've said is when they've prayed for physical healing, they'll experience a warmth travelling up their hands or their arms when they're prayed for, and they'll experience a peace and a joy. Now, I've read the boards outside these witchcraft kind of tours, and I read the exact opposite. People say, after I went into this place, I had scratches and bite marks, and I felt anxiety for days and weeks afterwards. I felt a chill going down my spine. I found it very interesting that these phenomena were the exact reverse of what people experienced from healing through the power of the Holy Spirit. Again, more of this death and ghosts and superstition. Had the pleasure of going away with the Edinburgh University Philosophy Society, and I joined them and very, very much enjoyed being a part of them. Very welcoming, friendly people. But when I went away for their kind of house party, it was held on Halloween at Roslin Chapel. You're probably familiar with Roslin Chapel from Dan Brown and the Freemasonry associations there. And even in meetings of the Philosophy Society, the leader we'd meet in a pub, we'd discuss something, and the leader would say, I'm now going to go outside and do some fire dancing, and pull out some fire poi, and in the middle of the street start waving them around and doing some pagan things there. And we find an interesting division in culture now, where Christianity is very much being driven to the margins of society, and paganism is being embraced. One of the interesting things I find is often I'm speaking to people about my faith, and people will say, Christianity, a load of rubbish, no evidence for it. And then at the same time, they'll be embracing something pagan, where where I'd say there'd be even less evidence from a rational basis for that being true. Last year, the Pagan Federation held its Scottish conference at Edinburgh University, but the move enraged the Christian Union, which accused the university of double standards after banning one of its events, which outlined the dangers of homosexuality. And so you had a situation where the university was opening the doors for one set of philosophies, but closing its doors for another. And this is a quote from historian Arnold Toynbee. It's not a quote, it's a writing about it. Historian Arnold Toynbee was educated at Winchester and New College, Oxford, and became a professor of the University of London. He concluded that society's creative energy is tied to the control of its sexual drives. Sexual self-control is linked directly to a national strength and accomplishment. Lack of self-control with national weakness and deterioration. Toynbee's research indicated that of history's 21 greatest civilizations, 19 perished from internal moral corruption, not from external enemies. And I'd maybe make the case that that's something that we're on the brink of in our nation at the moment. I don't know if you watch the news and you see year after year the statistics for sexual health among young people, how chlamydia is rising, abortion is rising, year upon year, families breaking down. And again, there's Richard Dawkins. He says that Darwin, it changed forever our view of the world and our place in it. And I'd agree with Dawkins on that one. If we've if we've just come from molecules which have randomly fallen together in us, there's no purpose in life, there's nothing when life ends, there's no judgment, there's no justice. And we're just here to have the best time that we can have and do the best for ourselves that we can. And that's the most meaning that we can find in life. But if there is a God who will judge us in righteousness after we die, then it would be a good thing to have spent our life wisely, to have looked out for others, to clothe those who are naked, feed those who are hungry, and do the things that He's created us to do. Again, there's David Hume outside the law courts in Edinburgh, and this picture, I think, sums up something of the lawlessness of our age. He's got two stone tablets there representing the Ten Commandments, and one of those stone tablets is under his foot in defiance, saying, we no longer need God's law, the law, do not steal, do not kill, do not commit adultery, and then the other one he's holding up blank, as if all God's laws have been wiped away and we're free to make up our own laws. If you've looked on the tally, you'll have seen, in the last few weeks, this kind of rising problem of knife crime among children. That we often think that do not murder is something which is so instinctive to human beings that it doesn't even need to be taught, and yet we're seeing in our society that we're in a position where it's not something which is assumed by young people. Now, I'm just going to show a short video. One of another thing which is taken off in Edinburgh to do with the rising of paganism is the celebration of Beltane and Samhain. And I'm going to read part of the Bible as I show some of this footage. One of the reasons that I wanted to do this talk, it was after reading the book of Romans and seeing that God spoke very much about the situation that we're in today, where He linked the rejection of God to the rise of paganism and the rise of immorality, and particularly when we as a society reject God as creator. So these guys in red represent their sexual spirits. David Hume with the pagans around him. The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of men who suppress the truth by their wickedness, since what may be known about God has been made plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, His eternal power and divine nature have clearly been seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. For although they knew God, they neither glorified Him as God, nor gave thanks to Him. But their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like mortal man and birds and animals and reptiles. Therefore, God gave them over in the sinful desires of their hearts to sexual impurity, for the degrading of their bodies with one another. They exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worshipped and served created things. Therefore, God gave them over to sexual immorality for the degrading of their bodies with one another. They worshipped and served created things rather than the Creator, who is forever praised. Amen. Because of this, God gave them over to shameful lusts. Even their women exchanged natural relations for unnatural ones. In the same way, the men also abandoned natural relations with women and were inflamed with lust for one another. Men committed indecent acts with other men and received in themselves the due penalty for their perversion. Furthermore, since they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, he gave them over to depraved mind, to do what ought not to be done. They've become filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed and depravity. They're full of envy, murder, strife, deceit and malice. They're gossips, slanderers, God-haters, insolent, arrogant and boastful. They invent ways of doing evil. They disobey their parents. They're senseless, faithless, heartless and ruthless. Though they know God's righteous decree that those who do such things deserve death, they not only continue to do these very things, but also they approve of those who practice them.